Welcome to Beat the Press. I'm Adam Riley, in for Emily Rooney. Our topics tonight: the Boston Herald sets the agenda with its focus on welfare fraud. An invitation to an off-the-record meeting divides news organizations. A major newspaper cuts its photo staff to focus on video. And our panel's media rants and raves of the week. Joining me are Dan Kennedy of Northeastern University, WGBH's Callie Crossley, Kara Miller, also of WGBH, and Tom Fiedler of Boston University. Well, sometimes a dog with a bone is a good thing. Case in point, the Boston Herald's persistent coverage of welfare abuse and EBT card fraud. And this week, the state auditor released a report validating the Herald's reporting. Emily Rooney has more.
This week's findings from the state auditor's office were shocking. Dead people getting welfare, 30,000 lost EBT cards, and hundreds of double dippers and people using relatives' cards.
It's a problem.
It's a story the Boston Herald has been doggedly pursuing for years. People using EBT cards to buy cigarettes, alcohol, even lottery tickets. The Herald also showcased a whoopie pie concessioner in trouble for refusing to take EBT cards. For his part, Governor Deval Patrick has dismissed the examples of fraud as anecdotal, saying, "I'm not going to do anything that makes vulnerable people beg for their benefits." The Boston Herald was also the first to report that the family of the bombing suspects was once on welfare. Not illegal, but interesting. And this week, the paper printed a copy of a receipt showing one EBT user with a $7,000 balance after spending a little more than $3 at a hardware store. Never mind paying the dead, that's enough to raise them.
Well, there's no question the Herald has been instrumental in keeping this, I think, on the front burner, making it a topic that the public is interested in. They are not alone. I think it's worth pointing out Fox 25 has spent a lot of time on this particular issue also. We should be careful, though, to note that there's no evidence that the Herald's coverage directly caused Suzanne Bump, the state auditor, to conduct the audit that she did. You know, there are some times when you can look at investigative work a paper has done. I'm thinking of the Globe and Sel DeMacy or the Globe and the Probation Department, and you can draw a straight line from a story or a series of stories to an action taken by the government. I don't think we had that in this case, but still, you know, they have been validated, I think, to a large extent.
Well, I think we can draw a reasonably straight line between the Herald's coverage and the auditor's pursuit of this story. I mean, we can't know for sure, but clearly the Herald has created this environment in which it seemed like a good thing to look into welfare fraud. And I think the Herald deserves quite a bit of credit for pushing this story along the way they have. Of course, I do think that we need to be careful about what all of the facts are in this particular story. I know that the Department of Transitional Assistance, for instance, is saying that the auditor's report is quite exaggerated in terms of what some of the problems are. And even if you go with the auditor's report, for instance, it turns out that the federal government did an audit of 10 states and found that the fraud rate was 0.2%. The fraud rate in Massachusetts was 0.12%. Barely two-thirds what the overall rate was, which perhaps you could extrapolate nationally. So although you hate to see any fraud with this, because this is money that poor people desperately need, it may be that this is exaggerated, but nevertheless, good for the Herald for pushing this story.
I mean, we've seen some very interesting reporting in the last year on the Department of Veterans Affairs and a huge backlog that exists and a lack of really good computerization of records. And it seems like some of that lack of good cross-checking and computerization of records is here, too. No, I agree with Dan. I think the Herald keeping this on the front burner all the time puts a lot of pressure on the governor to really look into it. And I think the Herald has uncovered some very interesting stuff and clearly some abuse. I do think, though, they undercut their own case a little bit when they talk about, you know, Deval Patrick being at his estate in the Berkshires, or people cashing in a lot on their cards from Orlando. They called it the amusement park capital, I think. Well, I mean, it does have a lot of amusement parks, but people also live in Orlando. I have no reason to believe, unless they showed me that the people were there visiting Disney World. Right. So I think some of those kinds of comments undercut a little bit of what they do, but clearly they have a lot of interesting facts here.
Well, I think this is the sweet spot for a tabloid, though, and they have picked this up and run with it. You said a dog with a bone. They're just as happy as they can be. I had to say I laughed out loud when I saw the line about Deval Patrick refused to comment from his estate in the Berkshires. Now this was their time to just twist it. So they're having fun with it, but I do think this is a serious public policy issue. This has been going on for, as Emily noted, for a long time. Certainly the House Speaker has been pushing this all through last year.
In part because of some Herald stories.
Well, and clearly that. So I think what the politicians have found is that they will have the wind at their back if they pick this issue up. And Suzanne Bump, I think, felt that there's really no lose in this for someone like Suzanne Bump. If they find the fraud, there's going to be enough there to go forward with. She's not going to get criticized by the Boston Globe for doing it unless she overplays her hand. I think, frankly, the Herald is to be congratulated. I think they have found some serious problems here, and we'll see how it plays out.
My whole thing, this is no attack on the Herald, has been tonal coverage of this issue in general, whether it be the Herald or anybody else. I know we're focusing on the Herald here, but it always seems to me to start from the tone of people are just ripping off the government, these greedy layabouts. And so there's always some facts I really feel compelled to articulate, that most of the people on food stamps are working. They are trying to use those benefits to pull it together. And what distresses me about uncovering that there are dead people getting some benefits is that there's some more people who could use those benefits who are not being able to, because there's some people that are on the rolls that shouldn't be. I think what was really critical in this last round of reporting for the Herald, because I haven't always appreciated the tone or the take. Fraud is fraud, not trying to appreciate that. But here's what I appreciated in this round of reporting was to articulate the very, in my mind, simple ways to check. Now, you mentioned we could be better at computerizing these things. Well, we could be. But before that, can't you see if somebody has 172 times of using a card? I'm sorry. That should be able to be seen on a piece of paper. I don't know that I have to have a computer to see that. So it's some stuff that we would do in our own houses to correct some mistakes that is so obvious. And that kind of stuff is really what I think took this to the next level and really infuriated people. Not only is there fraud, and there may be fraud with dead people, but I'll be something that you can't even check this, the simplest amount, that really makes people crazy.
Yeah, that definitely generates outrage.
And I can't blame them for being crazy. I just want, in the conversation about all of this, for us to understand that there is a need.